The cold had never bothered Kale before. 16 years of freight runs through the outer systems had acclimated him to the chill of deep space, to the point where he barely noticed the temperature anymore. But this was different. "Hold on," he muttered, flicking through the environmental controls on his ship's dashboard. The old Sparrow-class transport wasn't much to look at: patched hull plating, outdated navigation systems, and a perpetual smell of recycled air, but had never let him down. Until now. A warning light flashed insistently as external temperatures continued to plummet. Kale peered through the viewport at the frozen wasteland stretching before him. The surface of Proxima 4 was a barren expanse of ice and rock, whipped by winds that could strip the paint from a shuttle in minutes. He had only landed to investigate a distress signal, weak and garbled but unmistakable. Should have just kept flying, he grumbled to himself, pulling his thermal jacket tighter. The decision had plagued him for the better part of an hour. His delivery schedule was already tight. Medical supplies to the mining colony on Barrows wouldn't wait forever. But something about that signal. Desperation, perhaps. The kind you couldn't ignore, not if you'd spent as much time alone in the void as Kale had. His scanner beeped, picking up a faint energy signature half a kilometer east. With a resigned sigh, Kale sealed his helmet and stepped toward the airlock. "Ship, maintain minimal life support. I'll be back in 30 minutes. The trek across the icy plain was treacherous. Twice, Kale nearly lost his footing on hidden crevasses. The wind howled mercilessly, reducing visibility to mere meters. His suit's heating elements strained against the cold, and even with them at maximum output, his extremities had begun to ache. Then he saw it. The wreckage of a small vessel, unlike any human design he'd encountered. The sleek, curved hull was fractured open, exposing the ship's innards to the punishing elements. Scorch marks along one side suggested weapons fire rather than a mechanical failure. "Hello," Kale called out, his voice carrying poorly in the thin atmosphere. "Anyone alive in there?" Moving cautiously, he approached the damaged craft. His suit's sensors detected a breathable atmosphere within what remained of the hull. Someone had managed to seal off part of the ship. As he stepped through the makeshift airlock, a flicker of movement caught his eye. Someone, huddled in the darkest corner of the cabin, partially obscured by a tangle of wires hanging from the ceiling. Kale reached for his sidearm instinctively, then hesitated. The figure was small, trembling violently. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, voice softer now. "I picked up your distress signal." The figure shifted slightly, and Kale's helmet light illuminated features that were decidedly not human. A slender form with delicate limbs, skin the pale blue of distant stars, marked with intricate patterns that seemed to pulse faintly with their own inner light. Large, almond-shaped eyes regarded him with equal parts fear and hope. A female, Kale thought, though applying human gender concepts to alien species was risky at best. Her face was striking, almost human in its proportions, but with subtle differences that made it unmistakably alien. Those eyes, too large and too luminous, blinked rapidly as she assessed him. She was clearly suffering from exposure. Her light clothing, some sort of silvery, form-fitting garment, provided minimal protection against the cold. Her lips had taken on a darker blue tinge, and the patterns on her skin, which Kale suspected should be glowing brightly, flickered weakly like dying embers. "Can you understand me?" Kale asked, moving closer and crouching to appear less threatening. The alien made a soft, musical sound that his translator couldn't parse. She tried again, and this time a halting voice emerged from his comm unit. "Help. Cold. Please." Simple words, but they conveyed everything Kale needed to know. He nodded and extended a hand. "I have a ship nearby. Warmer there. Can you walk?" She attempted to stand but collapsed almost immediately. Kale caught her, surprised by how little she weighed. Her body was alarmingly cold, even through his insulated gloves. "Okay, I'll carry you." The journey back to the Sparrow was arduous. The alien weighed little, but the worsening storm made every step a battle. By the time they reached his ship, Kale's muscles burned with exertion, and his passenger had grown disturbingly still. Once inside, He laid her gently on the small medical cot in the ship's common area. Up close, in proper lighting, he could better assess her condition. The faint luminescence beneath her skin had dimmed further, and her breathing had become shallow and irregular. "Ship, full environmental diagnostics," Kale commanded, removing his helmet and outer gear. "External temperature, negative. 87 degrees Celsius and falling." The ship's computer responded. "Internal temperature systems compromised. Current cabin temperature, 12 degrees Celsius. Heating systems operating at 30% efficiency." Kale swore under his breath. The landing on the icy surface must have damaged the environmental controls worse than he'd thought. "Maximum power to heating systems," he ordered. Unable to comply. "Power reserves at 42% and declining. Maintaining current temperature requires 35% of available power." The alien shivered violently on the cot, her eyes fluttering open briefly before closing again. The patterns across her skin had dimmed to almost nothing. Kale rummaged through his supplies, pulling out every thermal blanket he had. He wrapped them around her slender form, but they seemed to make little difference. Her species clearly required higher temperatures than humans, and her condition was deteriorating rapidly. "Ship, what's the body temperature of our guest?" After a brief scan, the computer replied, "Subject's core temperature is approximately 25 degrees Celsius and falling. Based on physiological readings, normal temperature for this species is estimated at 38 to 40 degrees Celsius. Hypothermia, severe." Kale had seen it before in human victims: the confusion, the slowing metabolism, the gradual shutdown of organ systems. Without immediate intervention, she would die. He tried increasing the local heat around her cot with a portable heater, but the unit sputtered and died after a few minutes, another casualty of the damaged systems. The blankets weren't enough. The ship's heating couldn't be increased. Kale sat back on his heels, contemplating his options. There was one thing that might work, but the thought made him uncomfortable. Not because of any prejudice against alien life. 16 years of hauling cargo across the frontier had cured him of such notions, but because of the intimacy it would require. The emergency thermal sleeping bag, military grade, designed to reflect and amplify body heat in survival situations. It was meant for one person, but could fit two in an emergency. Direct body contact would transfer heat far more efficiently than any blanket. Kale hesitated, watching the alien's chest rise and fall in increasingly shallow breaths. The luminous patterns on her skin flickered like a failing light bulb. "Damn it," he muttered, retrieving the thermal bag from his emergency kit. He approached the cot and gently shook her shoulder. Her eyes opened slightly, unfocused and dim. "Listen," he said, speaking slowly so his words would translate clearly. "Your body temperature is dangerously low. My ship's heating system is damaged. I have an emergency thermal sleeping bag that could warm you up, but—" He paused awkwardly. "We would both need to be inside it. The shared body heat would be most effective." Understanding seemed to dawn in those strange, luminous eyes. She nodded weakly, a barely perceptible movement. "Okay, then," Kale said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. He unfurled the sleeping bag beside the cot, then gently lifted her. She was alarmingly cold to the touch, her skin like ice against his hands. After settling her into the bag, he hesitated again, suddenly aware of how bizarre this situation was. Here he was, about to climb into an enclosed space with an alien woman he'd met less than an hour ago. But there was no time for second thoughts. Her life depended on warmth that only direct contact could provide efficiently enough. Kale slipped into the bag beside her, trying to maintain as much distance as possible while still allowing his body heat to reach her. The thermal material immediately began to work, reflecting and amplifying the warmth between them. He positioned himself awkwardly on his side, facing away from her to give her what privacy he could in such close quarters. "Is this helping at all?" he asked after several tense minutes. A soft sound escaped her, not quite words, but some form of acknowledgement. Kale felt her shifting slightly behind him, and then, to his surprise, Her arms encircled his waist as she pressed herself against his back. "Whoa, okay," he said, startled by the sudden closeness. But he didn't pull away. Her need for warmth overrode his discomfort. They remained that way for what felt like an eternity, though his chronometer showed only 20 minutes had passed. Gradually, he felt her body temperature rising, the chill receding from her limbs. The sleeping bag had created a cocoon of warmth around them, and Cale found himself relaxing slightly as the immediate crisis began to pass. It happened. The patterns on her skin, the ones that had been flickering weakly since he'd found her, suddenly flared to life with blinding intensity. Brilliant blue-white light filled the sleeping bag, forcing Cale to squeeze his eyes shut. He felt a strange, tingling sensation, where her skin touched his, as though a mild electric current were passing between them. "What the?" he began, but his words caught in his throat as images flooded his mind. A vast city of crystal spires under a violet sky. The sensation of soaring through clouds. Faces, alien faces similar to hers, filled with concern, fear, determination. A ship, her ship, fleeing from larger vessels. Weapons fire. Pain. Cold. Fear. The deluge of foreign memories and sensations overwhelmed him. These weren't his thoughts. They were hers, somehow transmitted directly into his consciousness. Along with the images came emotions. Her terror when the ship was attacked, her desperation when the systems failed, her relief when he appeared, and now, gratitude, mixed with embarrassment and concern. As suddenly as it had begun, the flood of memories ceased. The blinding light from her skin patterns dimmed to a gentle glow. Cale found himself gasping for breath, disoriented by what he had just experienced. He turned to face her, questions tumbling through his mind. Her eyes were wide open now, fully alert and fixed on his face with an expression he couldn't quite interpret. What was that?" he managed to ask. Her lips moved, and this time his translator caught more of her words. "Forgive. Unintentional. When warm, energy returns. Connection happens." "Connection? You mean those images I saw? Those are your memories?" She nodded, then hesitantly touched her temple and then his. "Sharing. Emergency response of my kind. Saves energy when in pairs." Cale tried to process this new information. "So, this is normal for your species? Sharing memories when you're close to someone?" A complicated expression crossed her face. Not memories usually, just energy, warmth, but with different species. Unpredictable. Cale shifted back slightly, creating a small gap between them, though they remained in the confines of the sleeping bag. The luminous patterns on her skin had stabilized now, pulsing gently with what he assumed was her heartbeat or some similar biological function. "Do you have a name?" he asked, realizing he hadn't even covered this most basic information. Her lips curved into what might have been a smile. "Lyra," she said, the word clear even without the translator. "I'm Cale," he replied. "Freight hauler. This is my ship, the Sparrow." "Cale," she repeated, the name sounding musical in her accent. "Thank you. For warmth. For life." Her gratitude made him uncomfortable in a different way than their physical proximity had. He wasn't used to being thanked. Most of his human interactions were purely transactional. Anyone would have done the same, he said, though he knew it wasn't true. Plenty of spacers would have ignored the distress call entirely. Lyra's expression suggested she didn't believe him either. She reached out hesitantly, one slender finger tracing a line from his temple to his jaw, a gesture whose meaning he couldn't fathom. "Not true," she said simply. "Many would leave. Few would share. Warmth." Her touch left a tingling sensation on his skin, though nothing like the overwhelming connection from moments before. Cale found himself oddly transfixed by her eyes. Their unusual color reminded him of the nebulae he sometimes passed on long hauls, swirling blues and violets with pinpricks of light. He cleared his throat and focused on practical matters. "Your ship is destroyed. Were you alone? Are others looking for you?" The question made her stiffen, the patterns on her skin flashing briefly with a darker hue. "Not alone before. Others, gone now. A shadow passed across her features. Others hunting. Must hide. Hunting? Who's hunting you? Instead of answering directly, Lyra placed her palm against his forehead. Before Cale could pull away, another flash of images filled his mind, though less overwhelming than before. He saw massive ships, angular and threatening, with markings he didn't recognize. Warriors in dark armor. A small object of immense importance, though its exact nature remained unclear. Lyra fleeing, protecting something. A desperate plan. A crash landing. When a vision cleared, Cale found himself breathing hard again. You're carrying something. Something they want. Lyra nodded solemnly. Life crystal. From Homeworld. Contains. Knowledge. History. If they take it. She made a gesture like something shattering. And where is this crystal now? She tapped her chest, just below her collarbone. Cale noticed for the first time a slight prominence beneath the silvery fabric of her garment. Something embedded or implanted beneath her skin. The implications sank in slowly. Lyra wasn't just a stranded traveler. She was a fugitive carrying something of immense value, pursued by forces willing to destroy her ship to capture her. And now, by helping her, Cale had potentially made himself a target as well. Before he could fully process this realization, the ship's warning system blared to life. Proximity alert. Unidentified vessel approaching. Energy signature suggests weapons systems active. Cale scrambled out of the sleeping bag, nearly falling in his haste. Lyra's eyes widened with fear, the patterns on her skin pulsing rapidly. They found me, she whispered. The hunters. Cale rushed to the cockpit, bringing up the external sensors on the main display. What he saw made his blood run cold. A ship at least 3 times the size of the Sparrow was descending toward the planet's surface, its design matching the angular, threatening vessels from Lyra's shared memory. Ship power-up engines. Prepare for emergency departure. Warning, external temperature conditions extreme. Engine warm-up sequence requires 7 minutes. We don't have 7 minutes. Cale hissed, frantically initiating launch protocols manually. Bypass safety checks and direct all available power to engines and shields. He returned to find Lyra standing unsteadily beside the sleeping bag. The color in her skin pattern stronger now, but still fluctuating with what he assumed was fear or anxiety. They tracked energy signature, she said, from when we connected. My fault. Doesn't matter now, Cale said, grabbing his emergency pack and shoving essential supplies into it. We need to leave. My ship's warming up, but it'll take a few minutes. That's time we don't have if they've detected us. Lyra nodded, her expression resolute despite her obvious exhaustion. I can help. Slow them down. Ow. Instead of explaining, she moved to the ship's viewport, placing both palms against the cold surface. The patterns on her skin began to glow more intensely, concentrating in her hands. Cale watched in astonishment as a subtle distortion spread from her fingertips, extending outward into the storm beyond. Disruption field, she explained, voice strained with effort. Confuses sensors. Temporary. Cale didn't question further. He returned to the cockpit, monitoring the approaching vessel's trajectory. To his amazement, it had indeed slowed, making wide, sweeping patterns as if searching methodically. Whatever you're doing, it's working, he called back to Lyra. They seemed disoriented. The ship's computer announced, engine temperature reaching minimal operational levels. Emergency launch possible in 90 seconds. Cale strapped himself into the pilot's seat. Lyra, get in here and secure yourself. We're leaving in less than 2 minutes. She appeared in the cockpit doorway, visibly weakened from her efforts. The glow of her skin had dimmed again, though not as severely as when he'd first found her. She collapsed into the co-pilot's seat, fumbling with the safety harness until Cale leaned over to help secure it. This will be rough, he warned her. The Sparrow isn't made for combat maneuvers. Lyra met his gaze steadily. I trust you, Cale. The simple declaration caught him off guard. Trust wasn't something freely given in the frontier systems, especially not to strangers. Yet here was this alien woman, placing her life in his hands without hesitation. Launch sequence initiating, the computer announced. Warning, Recommended warm-up period not completed. Engine efficiency reduced by 40%. The Sparrow shuddered as its engines ignited, fighting against the planet's gravity and the howling storm. Kale guided the ship upward, keeping a wary eye on the scanner, showing the hunter vessel still making its searching pattern. "They haven't spotted us yet," he muttered, more to himself than to Lyra. "If we can reach the upper atmosphere before they reacquire their lock." The ship bucked violently as it pushed through the worst of the storm. Kale's hands flew across the controls, compensating for the buffeting winds and struggling engines. Despite the circumstances, he felt a familiar calm settling over him. This was what he knew: flying, surviving, adapting. They broke through the cloud layer into the upper atmosphere, the black void of space opening before them. For a moment, Kale allowed himself to hope they might escape undetected. Then the proximity alarm screamed again. Multiple energy signatures detected. Weapons lock attempting. The hunter ship had spotted them and was giving chase, joined by a second vessel that must have been waiting in orbit. Kale swore and pushed the Sparrow's engines beyond safe limits. "Hang on," he shouted as he executed a sharp, evasive maneuver. The smaller size of his ship gave them some advantage. They could change direction more quickly than their pursuers. But the Sparrow lacked the firepower to fight back, and its engines couldn't outrun the hunter vessels indefinitely. A blast of energy streaked past the viewport, missing them by meters. "Warning shot," Kale explained grimly. "They want you alive, I'm guessing." The crystal, too. Lyra's skin patterns had taken on a reddish tinge, which Kale interpreted as fear or anger. "Yes. Need me to extract. Crystal. Coded to my life force." Another energy blast, closer this time. The Sparrow shuddered with the proximity of the impact. "Ship, status of the jump drive?" Kale called out. "Jump drive functional, but requires 3 minutes to charge capacitors." 3 minutes they didn't have. The hunter ships were closing in, herding the Sparrow away from the clearer jump paths. "Kale." Lyra's voice was surprisingly calm. "I can help again, but we'll need your energy too." He glanced at her, noting the determined set of her jaw. "What do you mean?" "Like in sleeping bag. Connection. Share strength. Can create larger disruption field." Kale hesitated. The memory of that overwhelming connection made him wary. But with enemy weapons zeroing in on them and no clear escape route, they had few options. "Will it hurt?" he asked, hands still flying over the controls as he executed another evasive pattern. A hint of what might have been amusement flickered across Lyra's face. "No hurt. Strange for you, but not painful." Another near miss rocked the ship. Decision made. "Do it," Kale said, setting the autopilot to continue evasive maneuvers for 30 seconds. "Whatever you need." Lyra unfastened her harness and moved to stand behind his seat. Her slender hands came to rest on his temples, her touch cool but no longer ice-cold. "Open mind," she instructed. "Don't fight images." Kale took a deep breath and closed his eyes, trying to relax despite the dire circumstances. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the luminous patterns on Lyra's skin began to brighten, extending like delicate tendrils from her fingers to encircle Kale's head in a crown of light. The connection struck him like a tidal wave, stronger than before, but somehow more controlled. He felt Lyra's consciousness brushing against his own, not overwhelming him with memories this time, but drawing something from him. Energy, focus, determination, qualities he hadn't known could be shared. Through their link, he sensed what she was doing, extending a massive disruption field around the Sparrow, far larger than what she'd created planet-side. The effort was tremendous, drawing on both her natural abilities and the strength she was borrowing from him. In the strange dual awareness of the connection, Kale watched through the viewport as the hunter ships suddenly faltered. Their precise formation dissolved into chaos as targeting systems failed and communication scrambled. One vessel veered sharply away to avoid colliding with its companion. "Ship," Kale managed to say, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. "Jump drive status? Capacitors at 70% charge. Jump possible in 1 minute." Lyra intensified her efforts, The light from her skin, now so bright, illuminated the entire cockpit. Kale felt a strange, draining sensation, as though something essential was flowing out of him, but not in a harmful way. It was more like sharing a burden, redistributing weight to carry something together that would crush either of them alone. Through their connection, he sensed Lyra's gratitude and her concern for him. He responded wordlessly with reassurance, an instinctive understanding that surprised him with its ease. Jump capacitors fully charged, the ship announced. Plot course, Kale said, voice strained. Maximum distance. Random vector. Course plotted. Ready for jump. Kale reached up, placing his hands over Lyra's where they still rested on his temples. We're ready. You can stop now. The connection didn't break immediately. Instead, he felt a final surge of something from Lyra. Not energy this time, but emotion. Gratitude, admiration, and something deeper he couldn't quite name. Then she withdrew, the luminous tendrils receding back into her skin. She stumbled, nearly collapsing, and Kale caught her arm to steady her. Initiating jump, he said, and pressed the activation control. Space folded around them, stars stretching into lines of light as the Sparrow tore through the fabric of space-time. The hunter ships vanished from the sensors, left behind in real space as the small transport made its desperate escape. The jump lasted only moments before they emerged in a different system. One Kale didn't immediately recognize from the star patterns. He quickly checked the navigation console. We're in the Vermilion sector, he announced. Uninhabited system. No major travel routes nearby. Should be safe for now. He turned to find Lyra slumped in the co-pilot's seat, her skin patterns barely glowing, her breathing shallow but steady. The effort had clearly depleted her severely. Lyra? Are you all right? Her eyes opened slightly. Will recover. Need rest. Need warmth again. Kale nodded, understanding. He helped her back to the sleeping compartment, where the thermal bag still lay open. This time, there was no hesitation as he settled her inside and joined her, allowing his body heat to revitalize her as it had before. As her skin gradually brightened back to its normal luminescence, Kale found himself studying her features. What had seemed utterly alien just hours ago now held a strange familiarity. The connection they'd shared had changed something fundamental between them, creating a bridge across the vast differences of their species. Thank you, he said quietly. You saved us both back there. Lyra's eyes, those extraordinary nebula eyes, met his. We saved each other. There was truth in that, Kale realized. Without him, she would have frozen to death on that ice planet. Without her abilities, they would have been captured or destroyed by the hunter ships. What happens now, he asked. Those hunters won't give up, will they? Lyra shook her head slightly. They will search. The crystal, too valuable. What exactly is this crystal? You show me it contains knowledge, but what kind? Why is it so important? Lyra was silent for a long moment, as if considering how much to reveal. Finally, she placed her hand over the slight protrusion on her chest. Last record of my world. Before. Ending. Ending? You mean? Destruction. Var. Our sun. Weaponized against us. Her voice caught on something like grief, though the translator couldn't quite convey the full emotion. Few escaped, carrying crystals, memory of our civilization. The weight of her words sank in slowly. Lyra wasn't just a courier or a refugee. She was one of the last survivors of an extinct civilization, carrying the final records of her entire species' history and culture. And these hunters, they want to destroy this knowledge, want to control it. Our technology, our secrets, her expression hardened, would use against others. Cannot allow. Kale nodded slowly. The stakes were far higher than he had imagined when he'd first picked up that distress signal. What had begun as a simple rescue had become something vastly more significant. He was now entangled in the preservation of an entire civilization's legacy, and the safety of perhaps one of its last survivors. Where were you headed before they attacked your ship? He asked. Sanctuary. Hidden place. Other survivors gathering. She hesitated. Far from here. Dangerous journey. Do you know the coordinates? Lyra nodded. In my mind. Protected information. Kale considered their options. His original delivery run was now hopelessly off schedule. The Sparrow had sustained damage during their escape. They were being hunted by forces with resources far beyond his own. By any rational calculation, his wisest course would be to find a secure neutral port, help Lyra arrange alternative transport, and remove himself from the situation. But something held him back from suggesting this, something beyond the practical considerations. The connection they had shared, however alien and unexpected, had created a bond he couldn't easily dismiss. "I'll take you there," he heard himself say before he'd fully decided. "To your sanctuary." Surprise and hope mingled in Lyra's expression. "Dangerous for you. Hunters will not stop." "I'm already involved," Kale pointed out. "Besides, my ship's fast, and I know routes that don't appear on standard charts. We might just make it." A smile transformed Lyra's face, the patterns on her skin shifting to a warm, golden hue that somehow conveyed joy more effectively than words could have. She reached out, taking his hand in both of hers, and pressed it gently against the spot where the crystal lay beneath her skin. Through the contact, Kale felt a faint resonance. Not the overwhelming connection of their previous exchanges, but something subtler. A sense of rightness, of purpose that had been missing from his solitary existence. "We will need to repair ship," Lyra said, practical concerns returning. "I can help. My people, good with technology. And we'll need supplies," Kale added. "There's a minor trading post in the next system over. Not strictly legal, but they don't ask questions." He paused, considering. "Though we'll need to disguise you somehow. Your appearance is distinctive." Lyra's skin patterns dimmed slightly, concentrating more beneath the surface. To Kale's astonishment, the luminescence faded until her skin took on a more human-like opacity, though still with its distinctive blue tint. "Can control," she explained, seeing his surprise. "Not forever, but for short times. Enough to blend." "That's convenient," Kale said, impressed despite himself. "Though we should still find you less conspicuous clothing. The trading post can probably help with that too." They spent the next hour planning their approach, Lyra gradually regaining her strength while Kale assessed the Sparrow systems. The damage was significant but not catastrophic. With parts and time, they could make the necessary repairs. As they talked, Kale found himself opening up about his life on the frontier, his years of solitary freight runs, the various troubles and adventures he'd encountered. Lyra listened with genuine interest, occasionally asking questions that revealed how little she knew about human society. In turn, she shared fragments of her world's history, a civilization advanced far beyond humanity's in some ways, yet ultimately vulnerable to the same flaws: greed, fear, the lust for power. The crystal she carried contained not just cultural records, but technological knowledge her people had deemed too dangerous to be widely shared. Knowledge that had ultimately contributed to their downfall when it fell into the wrong hands. "The sanctuary," she explained, "is meant to preserve what remains, to learn from our mistakes. Perhaps one day, when the time is right, to share what we know with worthy allies." "Like humans?" Kale asked. Lyra's expression turned thoughtful. "Perhaps. Some humans." Her gaze met his. "Like you." The simple statement carried implications Kale wasn't ready to fully examine. Instead, he focused on the immediate future. "We should both rest before attempting the trading post," he suggested. "I'll take first watch, then wake you in a few hours." Lyra nodded, but made no move to leave the thermal sleeping bag they still shared. The ship's environmental systems had stabilized somewhat, but the cabin temperature remained cool enough to justify continuing their shared warmth. "Kale," she said after a moment of silence, "what happened before the connection was unusual." "Unusual how?" "So clear. So strong." She seemed to search for words. "My people connect, yes, but mostly energy. Feelings. Basic needs. Not memories, not thoughts. Not like with you." Kale considered this. Maybe it's because we're different species? Some kind of unexpected compatibility. Perhaps. She hesitated. Or perhaps something more. Before Kale could ask what she meant, an alert chimed from the cockpit. He extricated himself from his sleeping bag and checked the sensors. Long-range scan picked up a ship, he reported. Too far to identify, but on an intercept course. Lyra joined him, the patterns on her skin brightening with concern. Hunter ships can track jump signatures if close enough. May have followed trail. Then we move now, Kale decided. The trading post isn't ideal, but it's our best option for supplies and repairs. They worked quickly to prepare the Sparrow for another jump, shorter this time, to conserve power. As Kale programmed the coordinates, he found himself hyper-aware of Lyra's presence beside him. The subtle glow of her skin, the grace of her movements, the indefinable connection that had formed between them. Whatever happened next, whatever dangers they faced, one thing had become clear. The moment he'd offered to share his sleeping bag with the alien woman had changed the course of his life irrevocably. And despite all rational arguments to the contrary, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. As the Sparrow's engines hummed to life, preparing for the jump, Lyra placed her hand briefly on Kale's shoulder. No overwhelming connection this time, just a simple touch that somehow conveyed everything she wasn't saying aloud. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded, her extraordinary eyes reflecting the starlight from the viewport. Together, Kale activated the jump sequence, and the stars blurred around them as they leapt into the unknown. Two beings from worlds apart, united by circumstance and something neither could fully define, carrying a legacy that might someday bridge the vast distances between their kinds. The Sparrow vanished into the fold of space-time, leaving nothing behind but the fading echo of its energy signature. And perhaps, somewhere in the void, the distant hunters who had never stopped searching for the treasure Kale had unwittingly pledged himself to protect. Not the crystal, precious though it was, but Lyra herself.